What happens when a wildlife conservationist walks into a talk show expecting a friendly chat about animals, but instead gets ambushed with questions that turn the entire interview into a battleground? Robert Irwin, son of the legendary Steve Irwin, sat down on The View, thinking he'd discuss his latest conservation project. But Joy Behar had other plans. What started as a simple question about crocodiles spiraled into one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history, ending with security escorting someone off the set. But before we get into what actually went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me whose side you're on in this clash, because trust me, you're going to have opinions. So Robert walks on to the View set with that signature Irwin enthusiasm. You know the kind, bright-eyed, ready to talk about wildlife and conservation efforts. The audience is clapping, he's waving, he sits down. And the first few minutes are exactly what you'd expect. Whoopi Goldberg asks him about his recent trip to Northern Australia, and Robert lights up, talking about saltwater crocodile research. He's describing this massive croc they tagged, probably 20 feet long, and you can see the passion in his eyes, the same passion his father had. The audience is eating it up. People are smiling, nodding along. Then Joy Behar jumps in. Robert, that's all very interesting, but I have to ask, do you ever think that maybe we're spending too much time worrying about crocodiles when there are people suffering? You could feel the air change in the studio. Robert's smile doesn't fade completely, but there's a shift in his expression. He takes a breath and responds, "Well, Joy, conservation isn't about choosing between people and animals. It's about recognizing that healthy ecosystems support human life. When we protect wildlife habitats, we're actually protecting resources that communities depend on." Joy leans back in her chair, and you can tell she's not satisfied with that answer. But practically speaking, Robert, there are homeless veterans, there are children going hungry, and we're out here tagging crocodiles. Help me understand how that makes sense. Now the other hosts are exchanging glances. Sunny Hostis looks uncomfortable. Sarah Ann is trying to read the room, and Wookie's got this neutral expression that veterans of the show know means trouble's brewing. Robert shifts forward in his seat. With respect to Joy, that's a false dichotomy. My family's organization employs hundreds of people, supports local economies, and funds educational programs. Conservation work isn't frivolous, it's essential. And honestly, this framing, this idea that caring about wildlife means you don't care about people, it's exactly the kind of thinking that's gotten us into the environmental crisis we're facing. The audience makes that collective sound. You know the one, that sharp intake of breath that happens when someone says something bold on live television. Joy's eyebrows go up, and she's nodding, but not in agreement, more like she's gearing up for round two. Environmental crisis? Joy repeats. Robert, you're very young, and I don't mean that as an insult, but some of us have been hearing about environmental crises for decades. We were told about acid rain. We were told the ozone was disappearing. We were told Florida would be underwater by now. At what point do we acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, some of this is a bit exaggerated? You can see Robert's jaw tighten. He's trying to maintain composure, but there's a fire building behind his eyes. Joy, the ozone layer recovered because we took action. We banned the chemicals that were destroying it. That's not evidence that the threat was exaggerated. That's evidence that environmental policy works. And as for sea level rise, it's happening right now. Communities in the Pacific are being displaced. Miami floods during high tide. Joy cuts him off. Miami's always flooded, Robert. I've been going to Miami for 40 years. With respect, that's simply not accurate. Robert fires back, and his voice is louder now, firmer. The frequency and severity of tidal flooding in Miami has increased dramatically. This isn't opinion, it's measurable data. Whoopi tries to jump in. Okay, let's maybe bring it back to ... But Joy's not done. Robert, I'm just saying that your generation has been told the sky is falling your entire lives, and it makes me sad that young people are walking around terrified about climate when they should be enjoying their youth. That's when Robert's composure really starts to crack. Terrified, Joy? We're not terrified, we're informed. And honestly, it's attitudes like yours, this dismissiveness, this refusal to accept scientific consensus that's made this problem so much worse. My generation is inheriting a planet that's been degraded by decades of inaction, and now we're being patronized for actually trying to fix it. The studio goes dead quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Sarah Ann tries to change the subject. Robert, tell us about the new exhibit at Australia Zoo, ... But Joy interrupts. No, let him finish. He clearly has thoughts about my attitude. Robert looks directly at Joy. I'm not attacking you personally, Joy.
I'm criticizing a mindset. The mindset that says we can't care about multiple things at once, that says environmental science is somehow up for debate, that dismisses the concerns of young people who are actually going to have to live in the world we're creating right now. Joy's face is flushed. I've been on television for 30 years, Robert, and I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, Nobel Prize winners. I don't need a lecture from someone who grew up on a television show. And there it is. The gloves are off. Robert's face goes pale, then red. You can see his hands grip the armrests of his chair. That's incredibly disrespectful, Joy. My father dedicated his life to conservation and education. He died doing what he loved. And yes, our work was documented on television, but that doesn't make it any less legitimate. Would you say the same thing to Jane Goodall, to David Attenborough? Joy waves her hand dismissively. Those are scientists, Robert. You're a celebrity. I have a degree in conservation biology, Robert shoots back, his voice shaking slightly now, not from fear, but from pure frustration. I've published research. I work directly with endangered species recovery programs. What exactly makes my credentials less valid than anyone else's? Wilby tries again to intervene. All right, I think we need to take a breath here and ... But Joy's on a roll now. Your credentials are fine, Robert. I'm sure you're very smart. What bothers me is this self-righteousness, this moral superiority that your generation has. You come on shows like this and you lecture everyone about how terrible we've been, how we've ruined everything. And quite frankly, it's exhausting. Robert laughs, but it's not a happy laugh. It's the kind of laugh you make when you can't believe what you're hearing. Self-righteous, Joy? You've built a career on having strong opinions and telling people when you think they're wrong. How is me defending conservation science any different from what you do every single day on this show? The audience reacts with a mix of gasps and scattered applause. Sunny Hosta's eyes are wide. Sarah Ann looks like she wants to disappear into her chair. Alyssa Farah Griffin is just watching the whole thing unfold like she's witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Joy points her finger at Robert. The difference is, I've earned the right to have strong opinions. I've lived through wars, recessions, social movements. You've lived through what? Instagram? I've lived through the 6th mass extinction, Robert counters immediately. I've watched species disappear. I've seen coral reefs die with my own eyes. I've held animals in my hands that are the last of their kind. So forgive me if I think that gives me the right to have strong opinions about conservation. Joy shakes her head. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Everything is a crisis. Everything is the end of the world. You know what we called people like you when I was growing up? We called them alarmists. And you know what we call people like you? Robert's voice is raised now, clearly angry. We call them deniers. We call them obstacles. We call them part of the problem. The studio audience is losing it. Some people are clapping, some are booing, some are just sitting there with their mouths open. Whoopi stands up from her chair. Okay, we need to stop right now, Whoopi says sternly. But both Joy and Robert are locked in. Joy stands up too. I am not a denier, Robert. I believe in climate change. What I don't believe in is being told that I should feel guilty for living my life, for traveling, for enjoying things by someone who has made millions of dollars off of animals. Made millions? Robert stands up now, and producers off camera are starting to move. Every dollar our organization makes goes back into conservation. My family lives modestly. We don't own private jets or multiple mansions. We spend our money saving habitats and funding research. What do you spend your money on, Joy? That question hangs in the air like a bomb. Joy's face goes red. How dare you question how I spend my money? You don't know anything about my life, about what I do with my resources. You're right, I don't, Robert says, and his voice is calmer now, but somehow more cutting. But I know you fly to your vacation home regularly. I know you've advocated against wind farms because they might spoil your view. I know you've mocked young climate activists on this very show. So forgive me for questioning whether you actually care about any of this, or if you just like arguing. Sunny tries to interject. Robert, I think maybe we should... No, let him talk, Joy interrupts. Let him tell us all how terrible I am. Let him explain how his generation has it all figured out and the rest of us are just stupid or selfish. Robert takes a deep breath. I never said you were stupid, Joy. I said your attitude is part of the problem. And it is. When someone with your platform dismisses environmental science, when you mock young people for caring about the future, you're actively making it harder to address these issues. You have influence whether you want to acknowledge it or not, and you're using that influence to spread apathy. Joy's voice is incredulous. I care about plenty of things, Robert. I care about healthcare, I care about education, I care about human rights. Just because I don't prioritize your pet project doesn't mean I'm apathetic. It's not a pet project. It's the foundation of everything else, Robert says, and he's gesturing with his hands now, animated. You can't have healthcare without clean water. You can't have education without a stable climate. You can't have human rights when people are being displaced by environmental disasters. Everything connects, and the fact that you don't see that is terrifying, because you're smart enough to understand it, which means you're choosing not to. Joy picks up her notes from the table and throws them down. I don't have to sit here and be insulted by someone who thinks spending time with koalas makes him morally superior to everyone else. And I don't have to sit here and be condescended to by someone who thinks age equals wisdom. Robert fires back. Some of the most ignorant, short-sighted, destructive decisions in human history have been made by old people who thought they knew better. The audience gasps. Whoopi raises her voice. All right, that's enough. We're going to commercial. But Joy's not stopping. Get him off my stage. I'm serious. Get him out of here. Robert laughs again, that same bitter laugh. Your stage? It's not your stage, Joy.